So again, welcome everyone to the February 8th New Jersey Youth World Food Prize. My name's Matt Newman. You may recognize me from our earlier sessions we've had here. As we're waiting for some of our other participants to join us, I'm going to ask all of you right now to, in the chat pod, write down a quote that speaks to you. Like, what's one of your favorite quotes? So again, as we're waiting for some of our other Youth World Food Prize participants to join us, in the chat pod, just take a moment to write down one of your favorite quotes. And we do have some guests with us here this evening. I'm going to invite them to do the same. If there's a quote that you know is one of your favorite quotes, or it speaks to you, it means something to you, take a moment and just put that in the chat pod here real quick. Again, my name is Matt Newman. This is the Youth World Food Prize for New Jersey 4-H, and we'll get going here in just a little bit. It's good to see so many familiar faces. We have a pretty big deadline that got extended. It was on Friday. We got a little bit of a extension on that. And I see we have some of our first quotes coming in. So we have from Raj, "Don't let yesterday take up too much of today." Ooh, that's really good. I like that, Raj. And again, I should know the names by now. Let's see here. Anushka says, "My favorite quote is, treat others the way you want to be treated." I like that a lot. Maya says, "We can complain because rose bushes have thorns, or rejoice because thorn bushes have roses." From Abraham Lincoln. I like that. Marissa, "Without food, man can live at most but a few weeks. Without it all other components of social justice are meaningless." I like that, Marissa. Very appropriate to what we're doing too.
Norman Borlaug himself.
Oh, food is a fundamental right. It's hard to keep up with all these. These are wonderful. Nana, "Push yourself because no one else is going to do it for you." I love it. Lucine, oh, one of our guests, thank you. "Small acts, when multiplied by millions of people, can transform the world." That is awesome. And then from Tracy, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that." These are awesome. I might actually have to cut and paste some of these for myself. If you have not yet done so, I encourage you, I invite you to put down your quote in the chat. But I think we have from Abby here. "Do small things with great love." Mother Teresa. I like that a lot too. Yes. So we're going to get going here in just a little bit. Again, if you haven't done so, please share your quotes. We'd love to see what those are. We do have a special guest here tonight. So I'm actually going to ask Abby to introduce our guests.
All right, tonight we have Commissioner Tracy Zohr from Bergen County. So I know this was a recent change, right? You guys were freeholders, now you're commissioners. So Commissioner Zohr is here to talk to you about food security issues in Bergen County mostly. But, you know, sure, the issues that we face in Bergen County are issues that are faced everywhere in New Jersey and probably across the country also. And we are excited to have her here because we did struggle a little bit when we were trying to talk about issues that we saw at home. So hopefully she can shed some light for us and maybe encourage us, or we can find some inspiration from her to make changes here at home and to help where we can. So, and also, do you want to introduce Lucine?
Lucine Valerian is my assistant, and she's going to most importantly be manning the PowerPoint so that I can just talk to you guys and dive in. First of all, I want to thank all of you for being part of this conversation. I'm so excited to see all of you being part of this, you know, moving things forward as far as how we are addressing food security issues here in New Jersey and here, you know, nationwide. This is a really challenging time for all of us. We are seeing these spikes in need in our communities that are massive. And so the more folks who are engaged in this issue, the more ambassadors that we're creating to be broadcasting that this is a problem that our neighbors are struggling with, the more solutions that we're going to come up with, the more long-term sustainable solutions that we're going to attack. And more importantly, the more sensitivity and the more resources that we're going to be able to bring to bear to deal with these issues that our neighbors are dealing with every single day. Lucine, if you could start the PowerPoint, that would be great. And by the way, if there are any questions, feel free to pop them into the chat, and I will try and answer them as we're going in real time. And if not, I will definitely get to them at the end. But to just by a little bit of background, I don't know how many of you are from Bergen County or where in the state you're from, but Bergen County is this upper northern part of the state. It has a reputation of being a relatively affluent community, and that's one of the things that we're trying to overcome, because we are seeing so much need in our community that it almost, the statistics that we're seeing are not resonating with our neighbors, and it therefore makes it harder for them to realize that this is a true problem. In our community, we have about 80 about 80 different food distribution efforts that are going on. We have 70 municipalities. We have our population is about 1 million residents. About 174,000 of them are currently unemployed. And that is one of the things that is driving so much of the conversation that we're seeing about food insecurity right now. Can you go to the next slide?
And Commissioners, real
Yes.
quick, I know that you said this. I would just like to remind all of our participants, I'm going to be watching the chat. So if any of our participants here tonight have any questions, are they encouraged to either save them for the end, or do you want them to just ask them when they have them?
I'll try and either answer it in real time if it's about a specific slide. If not, I will get to it at the end if I, for some reason, miss it. But I'll try and be as responsive as I can throughout the presentation.
Thank you.
So when the pandemic hit in March, one of the first questions, I started to reach out to a lot of our community-based organizations to see what they were seeing on the ground. And many of these, so understand that even while everything else was closed down, our food pantries were all open, struggling to get protective gear, masks that were unavailable only to healthcare workers, gowns, things to keep the volunteers safe. Many of these pantries were reporting not only this tremendous increase in need, but many of them are traditionally staffed by senior citizens or retirees, and many of them were being encouraged to stay home. So not only did you have like completely, everybody was hoarding their own food. Nobody was going to supermarkets. There was no Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts standing in front of the supermarket collecting cans. All of that had stopped. A lot of their big galas or fundraising efforts for the year also had to be canceled. And most importantly, their volunteers dried up because so many of them were being encouraged to stay home because COVID affected those over 65 more profoundly. So you had the perfect storm where you had exponential need, decreased supply, decreased funding, and no volunteers. And so this chart, this graph here, just is tracking some of the most recent data that we have from our food pantries. One of our food pantries in Fairview went from like 25 families that they were serving, and now we're doing over 450. The Park Ridge one to me is the most mind-blowing, because Park Ridge, the Triborough Food Pantry, serves Wycliffe Lake, Montvale, and Park Ridge. They was serving 30 families. They served 210 on Thanksgiving. And if you know anything about those towns, those are, middle to upper middle class towns. And that's not necessarily where we expected to see it in a Fairview or in an Englewood, which has a traditional population that has always dealt with food insecurity. But to see it in some of these other, Ramsey right now is dealing with 149 families. And what's nerve-wracking for us is that those numbers are continuing to increase. There was a study that was done about the 2008 recession, using that as a bellwether, and it showed that food insecurity did not hit its peak until 2 years after the recession began. That's when people had gone through their savings, they'd maxed out their credit cards, or were in really deep, and that's when it got the worst. And so we know that this is a really long marathon that we're heading, that this is not going to be something that goes away. It took 10 years for levels of food insecurity to go back to pre-2008 levels before that recession, before the recession hit. So we're expecting that it's going to be the same here in this situation. Some national statistics: about 1 in 4 children don't know where they're going to get their next meal from. That's 17 million kids. The statistic in New Jersey is about 1 in 6. And it's still an insane number when you think about how many kids don't know where they're getting their next meal. And when you think about also with schools, so many schools being virtual, there's still school lunches are still available, but many parents don't have the ability to get there during working hours to pick up that school lunch. And so there's many kids who would have been eligible for free or reduced lunch that are not getting that food. You can see more than 50 million people face hunger because of the coronavirus. In Bergen County, we have an increase of 71%, which is 43,000 newly food insecure due to COVID. 5.3 million senior citizens are currently facing hunger. Some of that is accessibility. Much of that is because of, they can't get out to get the food that they were previously getting. Much of it is due to their inability to work or their inability to earn the extra income that they were potentially earning as well. So many more households are relying upon their local food banks and their local food pantries. You can go to the next slide. So as I was touched on before, these are our before and after statistics. You can see that in Bergen County, in 2018, we had 60,790 folks who are food insecure, and we are now over 103,000 individuals who do not know where their next meal is coming from. So that's about 43,000 newly food insecure individuals in our county. The child population, you can see that those statistics are equally jarring. So this is the reality that many people are facing. And specifically in Bergen County, part of the challenge is that housing costs are high. And they always say that rent is always the first the first one that gets to eat. People are so worried about losing their homes that they pay their rent first. And then it's making those very hard decisions of, do we have money to pay our car insurance or our for food? And I think that's what I have been most unnerved about, is that most people don't realize that their neighbors are going through these struggles. If you can go to the next slide. So as I mentioned, we put together, we formed in April. As we saw this really unfolding, we realized that our food pantries were not talking to each other. They were not collaborating in how to maximize resources. They were not collaborating in messaging. They were not necessarily connected to larger food entities like the Community Food Bank of New Jersey or Table to Table, which could get them more food into their pantries. And we're relying on kind of the same model, that they had for the last 50 years, where people drop off cans during the week, the senior citizens sort them and give them out to those in need in the community at the church or at the food pantry. So one of the first things we did is we first identified where all the food pantries in our county. And we, as I said, we have identified over 80 different food distribution efforts that are ongoing. About 65 of them are permanent food pantries. Some of them are emergency food distribution efforts that are specifically related to COVID. And what this map does, and why this is an important tool, is that it gives, someone can click on it, know when their distribution hours are. So if they're in need, they can go and figure out what kind of food is going to be distributed. Do they give out only non-perishable cans, or are they giving out healthier dairy or fruit or other kinds of things as well? And most importantly, it lets folks also know where they can donate and what hours they're open to accept donations as well. So it communicates to both sides of the equation. And I think it's an important tool. This is another tool that we're in the process of developing that it's an interactive story map that will help us tell the story of what food insecurity looks like. Each of these little fireflies you can click onto, and it tells you how many cases of free or reduced lunch there are, but it also overlays unemployment data and overlays how many people are receiving SNAP benefits. And that way we can hopefully get a little bit of an idea of where the hotspots might be and where the needs might be most profound, so that we can help support those pantries who are dealing with those increased needs that they may not have been necessarily anticipated. I'm a big believer in data being vital. It helps us figure out how to allocate resources. It helps us to figure out, how we can best serve. Marissa, we got this data from a bunch of different sources. So the SNAP, we collect that every month from our Board of Social Services, which is the entity that does disseminates all of our SNAP benefits. The free and reduced lunch information comes from our school districts, and then the unemployment data comes from the state division of the unemployment division. You can go to the next slide. Oh, that's it. Okay, so our goals with the Food Security Task Force are a couple-fold, because obviously our food pantries need more resources. So many of them are seeing this really increased need and don't have the resources themselves. And so part of it is getting out the information that look at what is going on in our communities and enlisting more people to help. I think so many folks were exceedingly generous between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and then kind of forget that people need to eat 365 days a year. And so we're trying to get out the messaging and engage our community partners in ongoing food drive efforts, but also just, making one of the tools that we're in the process of assembling is I don't know how many of you are familiar with Sign Up Genius, if you've used that for PTA or what have you. We're trying to create a system similar to that, where our pantries can put what their needs are and then crowdsource for people to sign up for those individual needs. So if they need 14 dozen eggs, they could put that out and have folks sign up. So we're just in the early development stages of this, but I think this could be a long-term sustainability game changer for us to be able to get healthier food in there. One of the things that we did is we immediately did an analysis of what infrastructure people had. The first thing we realized is that 15 of our food pantries didn't even have computers. We're sending out emails and shocked that no one's responding, but 15 of our food pantries didn't even have computers. And so that was like a first thing that we had to go ahead and make sure that everyone was equipped to communicate in the 21st century. The next thing that was also assessing who had refrigeration and freezer capacity. Because understand, if you can only get what we're really trying not to do is create a next generation of diabetics and folks with hypertension and obesity. And to understand how linked food insecurity is to these social determinants of health. I know that we're all on these screens all day and how hard it is to focus. I have this one food pantry, I don't want to throw it under the bus, but Hasbrook Heights, that boasts that it gives out Pop-Tarts and mac and cheese because that's what the kids want. Well, it is what the kids want, but can you imagine how hard it is to sit in front of a screen if you're jacked up on sugar and carbs all day and you don't have any vegetables or protein or other things? Or, if you're turning into that Joe Pesci commercial at 3:00 in the afternoon because there's no food in your refrigerator. These things really undercut your ability to succeed academically, which will impact your ability to succeed going forward. But more importantly, it sets this framework of an unhealthy diet. We have seen in the last 8 years, even prior to COVID, it has been identified as part of the hospitals every 3 years have to get together and do this community health needs assessment. And for the last 8 years since I've been a commissioner, I was a freeholder, but county government, that it has identified obesity and diabetes as huge issues within the minority communities. And you can ask, how can you be obese and hungry at the same time? But if you understand that if you don't have food, you tend to overeat because you don't know where your next meal is coming from. If the only food that you're being given is pasta at the food pantry, you're not getting that balance of nutritional needs that you have to be able to set you up for a healthier outcome. And so one of the key things that we're focusing on is how do we get healthy food into our food pantries? And one of the things, and I put this out to you guys because I know this is your focus, but community gardening is a huge way of potentially getting food into our pantries. Doing some projects like that over the summer where you are engaging and getting that food to your food pantries, most of them will accept it, especially, heartier vegetables, potatoes, onions, lemons, oranges, apples, things that don't necessarily need refrigeration. I'm sorry. Those things are vital for food pantries, but they also need the dairy, the protein, the other items. And it's like man can't live by can of tuna alone. It is there is so much sodium, there's so many other healthier options for us. And then the other piece of this is trying to engage your age folks in being part of the solution. One of the things we're doing is a project at we have a magnet high school. It's it's called Bergen Tech, the Bergen Academies and Paramus Tech. They are doing a project where they're kind of playing a game of Chopped with the basket from the food pantry and being like, how do we stretch this basket for a week? What recipes can we come up with, and then share those recipes with the pantry communities and have them share them with their clients to give a different bent to how maybe other ideas of things you could do with that box to stretch it a little bit further, or how you can put a little bit of, a healthier spin on some of those items that you're necessarily receiving. So, we kind of joke that we are building this plane while we're flying it. We are both dealing with emergency needs at the same time as we're trying to set this infrastructure for long-term food, nutritional health policy, best practices, and all that kind of stuff. And I really think that, when you talk about, without food, man can live at most a few weeks. You're right. This is the key component to social justice. It's like, you can't get beyond that lower level of, there's this thing called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you're only going, at the base level, you can't ever get beyond that. It's really problematic. And, one of the things that was reported at the beginning of this to us was that many people were going to 4 or 5 food pantries to get what they really needed for a week. There's very few of our food pantries who are actually giving out a week's worth of food, or things you can really make meals out of for a week. And I think getting our communities used to what's a good donation is really important. That leftover can of sun-dried tomatoes in the back of my closet isn't going to make a meal for someone. And to understand that we need to get healthy foods into people's hands, and also, by the way, there's food allergy issues. There's people who have celiac disease or other allergies. Like, those people also struggle. If you think about the cost of food for those individuals who may need lactose-free diets or gluten-free diets, those are things that our pantries struggle with too. So I could babble on about this for like 12 hours because I'm really passionate about trying to make sure that, that we're helping folks overcome this hurdle. And the other piece that we're doing also, I want to comment on, is connecting people to the services to get them to move beyond food insecurity. Food insecurity is a symptom, and whether that the underlying cause is, job insecurity and they need to get additional training at our job center, or they need affordable childcare or connection to rental assistance or other things that are causing the food insecurity. It's trying to look holistically at a person, get them connected to the tools that they need that can help them lift themselves out of needing to go to food pantries going forward. So that's the other piece that we're super focused on as well, creating that connective tissue for referrals so that we can get people the help and support that they need, but more importantly, lift them up out of this situation. So any questions? Okay, I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
No. Go ahead, Matthew. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, I'm sure there are a lot of questions. And so many of your points, Commissioner. So the nature of their research project, as I'm sure Abby shared with you, is to identify, a barrier to food security in a country, and then the solution to that. And when we first started having began our program here, however many weeks ago, so many of the points that you raised about just the food situation in Bergen County was what we found in so many other countries around the world. It's not necessarily having access to food, but what we define food as being. And the point that you said, nutrient rich, it has to be nutritional. It's not enough to just have, and I felt personally attacked, Pop-Tarts and soda, because I love that. But no, I'm being silly right now. It's having access to that nutrient, protein rich types of food, correct?
Yeah. And, but when you talk about those underlying causes too, and that's one of the things that we're looking at really profoundly, there's a term called sticky floors. Many women kind of get stuck at home, because of the childcare issues, if they cannot be fully employed to the extent that they need to be able to adequately support their families. And so to be able to then connect folks to affordable childcare, one of the things that we did a survey, diapers and feminine hygiene products are actually some of the most sought after items at food pantries. They're not covered by food stamps. You can only use food stamps on food items. So you can't use them on cleaning products. You can't use them on toothpaste. None of those things are covered. So those items, if you think about the cost of diapers and how expensive that can be and what kind of hit that is to your overarching budget and what that takes out therefore from your table, is really challenging. And so you look at these other, contributing factors of why people are struggling, and senior citizens likewise, senior citizens also have the need for diapers and, in order to be mobile very often. And those costs are very prohibitive as well. So, if you think about how little there was I remember Cory Booker did a challenge where he tried to live off of off of SNAP, which is about for $4. It's about $4 a day for food. It's very hard to do. And so if you think about seniors who are living off of fixed incomes, whether it be pension or Social Security, to make those dollars go far, many of them are choosing between their costs of medications, their costs of adult diapers, or their or food. So there's a lot of causes that contribute, and it's seeing where we can come up with some of those solutions, I think, that are part of the challenges.
This is a lot of really good information. Do any of our 4-H participants, do any of you have any questions for Commissioner Zur? You may either unmute yourself, you can put it in the chat as you're formulating what some of those questions may or may not be. Commissioner Zur, you mentioned it in your presentation here earlier this evening. What can happen if people don't have access to food, some of the impacts to that. So as these young people go forward into this brave new world, do you have any advice or recommendations on how they can be a part of the solution?
So, I mean, I have to say that I'm a huge believer in kids and our teenagers. I mean, I have watched our kids and teens lead us, whether it have been in peaceful protests this spring or in anti-gun violence prior to that. I mean, you all have such powerful voices, but whether it's doing a canned food drive or growing a garden or just raising awareness or volunteering your time, I have to say, like right now, there are so many agencies that are really shorthanded because of the lack of seniors. And so if you do have many of them, I don't know how old everyone is on this line. Some have cutoffs, different pantries have their own cutoffs as far as when they'll accept people, but most are 16 and up and will allow you to come and volunteer, but they definitely need the help packing boxes, sorting, all that kinds of stuff, because as our seniors are being told to come home, stay home because of the virus, the manpower is definitely vital. We actually have a portal on the Bergen Volunteers. It's on the food security website as well, but it's on our Bergen Volunteer Center. So if you want to volunteer to food pantry, we're constantly posting, updated food drives, updated information about disseminations and ways that you can plug yourself in to being parts of the solutions and helping your neighbors who are in need.
Awesome, awesome. Well, our participants are being uncharacteristically silent here this evening, but don't misinterpret that for disengagement. I think you have provided so much information that they're probably just trying to coalesce their thoughts around some of this and just like kind of take that moment.
If they coalesce and they have any questions going forward, they can feel free to shoot Lucine and I an email, and we'll be happy to answer it for them even after tonight is over. I'm always happy to engage our young people in being part of the solutions going forward. So whatever we can do, I'm Bergen County based, but I certainly know many of my counterparts in other counties as well. This is not, unfortunately, this is a problem everyone is seeing throughout the state. The Community Food Bank of New Jersey, which is based in Hillside, also has huge needs. They do socially distant packing events for different organizations. So if you guys wanted to sign up and do something of that sort as an entity, they'd probably be ecstatic for the extra manpower. But the whole point is, by being that ambassador, you're first of all destigmatizing it so people feel more comfortable coming forward and talking about the need. And I think that that's another piece of it. There's shame associated with this. And I think, as I said, we're dealing with 10% of our population here in Bergen County. There should be no shame in this. We are all in this together. We're here to support each other as a community during a hard time. That's what makes a community. And so I thank you guys for being part of it.
Well, thank you so much. Sure. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
All right. I just wanted to make sure she was mindful of the time. There's another meeting.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I think actually that's probably a great segue. I'd like to, on behalf of all of us here tonight, give a round of applause. Thank you so much for availing yourself being here tonight. And I see that you've provided an email there. So if any of our participants have any questions, may we also share that to all of them in an email?
Absolutely.
Well, thank you again so much. This was great.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice
Bye.
night. That was awesome. So, though we have a short turnout tonight, where is everyone?
Yeah, guys.
But thank you for being here. This is great. So, I'm gonna turn it over to, I think, Abby, right? Or no? I guess we're just trying to figure out where everyone is with your papers. If you have any questions, if you've submitted, I know I saw rather Raj, and he's not here anymore, so I'll have to email and follow up with Raj, see how his paper's going. Does anyone have any questions for us?
Did anyone submit their paper already?
The ones who aren't on the call now.
That's what I was assuming.
Click on.
Oh, no, look. Anisha did and May did. That's awesome.
That
All
is
right.
awesome.
And I did hear from, did I?
Maybe.
Vivek, right? Yes, I heard from Vivek. So he sent me a rough draft. So hopefully we're in good shape. How's everybody else doing?
Looks like we got 4 of our participants here tonight, 4 out of the 6 at least say they did. Maybe we're in various stages of progress. I know for my 3 mentees, I have seen at least drafts of all 3. I got another one that I'm working on reviewing right now. Ariana says, I will be submitting my paper tonight. Awesome.
Woohoo! Sid, have you been in touch with your mentor? It's not me, right?
I think Christine.
A little bit? Okay. All right. Well, reach out if you need additional help.
I am going to stop recording now, but we're still going to hang around if anyone has any questions for us. So the recording's ending now.